Hello, welcome. My name is Karina Kaiko. I am one of the covenant advisors here at Oakland Mills. I'm covenant advisor for property concerns. This is Gary Wentholtz. He's our covenant advisor for letters of compliance. And Mike Vaughn is our covenant advisor for applications, exterior alteration applications. He'll be here shortly. But we'd like to thank you for coming out tonight. And tonight, as you know, we're going to be talking about bamboo. We have Eric Walker from CA. He's our natural resource specialist. And he's going to be talking about the process that they go through and lots of other great information about bamboo. I know it's kind of all over the place, more than we might have expected. And so we're excited to hear all the information he has to share with us. I see most of you have gotten handouts, so that's great. Feel free to grab a water if you need. Restrooms are up at the front where you came in if you need them. We will be recording tonight, but none of you can be seen unless you come up here. We're just recording the presentation so we can put it up for folks who weren't able to make it. So just wanted to let you know that. And so we will be putting it just up on the Open Mills YouTube.
All right, so thanks, Karina. Thanks for having me, and thanks for coming out, everybody. So the talk is called Taming the Bamboo, Effective Methods for Controlling Non-Native Invasive Bamboo in Residential and Natural Areas. I'm Eric. I work with the Sustainability Department in open space down on Gerwig Lane. And one of the things we're tackling now is invasive bamboo on a case-by-case basis. And so this talk was originally kind of brought about by the covenant advisors and other people who inquired about bamboo. And we had a talk like a year, maybe was it 2 years ago here? But I'm here today to answer questions, but also to inform people about our process for removing bamboo and what that looks like. So the outline is to just talk about invasive plants, what they are, why are they bad, what is CA doing, and then we're going to talk about bamboo specifically. And it's really important to understand biology and physiology and everything about the life cycle of these really tenacious invasive plants if you want to effectively control them. So we have quite a bit on the biology and the way that they reproduce. We'll go into some neat factoids, just interesting tidbits about bamboo, and then go over some of the negative impacts and touch on those impacts all over the area, but also in Colombia specifically, and then talk about control methods. And then I have a bunch of project examples we can go through, and I'll talk about each of those, what we did and the time of year, things like that. So and then there was 4 pre-submitted questions, and so we'll do those at the end, and we can also open up for discussion or other questions after that. So invasive plants, everybody hears about these, but there's a lot of different words that are thrown around, and the ones that are commonly used are listed here. This is more of like just to straighten things out about native and non-native. But native plant is any plant that historically grew in this region, and I put ecotype in there because that's like a word that defines genetic composition of something generally within 200 miles of a particular area where you're standing. So true native plant with pre-European contact would be something within 200 miles of here. That's a real simple way to think about it. Alien, non-native, and exotic just all mean the same thing. They're just occurring outside their native range. Naturalized just means that they've come outside their native range and they've been able to reproduce successfully. They're here and they're reproducing, like dandelions would be a classic example of that, or a plantain. So then you have invasive species. So these are plant or animal species that harm regional ecosystems, and native plants generally cannot be invasive. Some people will get argumentative on this. They can be aggressive, but evolution has made checks and balances, and that's kind of the point here, is that if a native plant like black cherry gets really aggressive here in the United States, up there you can see a circle, that's where we are. Black cherry is a weedy in Europe. So follow the line of latitude to the east and you'll notice that black cherry lands where all those other weeds are that we've named that we have here. So English ivy, lesser celandine, mile a minute, multiflora rose, winter creeper, stilt grass, burning bush, the list goes on and on. Like we've identified over 150 non-native plant species, and of which 40 to 50 are a serious problem, and we manage a handful of those. We'll talk about those specific ones here in a second, but all that to say that generally there's checks and balances in this system, predators that will keep their populations in check. So noxious weeds is that word noxious is kind of a legal designation. It's largely used in like agricultural settings, but there are noxious weeds in Maryland that are listed for control that have been deemed harmful. Typically it's because of a human harm, but sometimes to ag production, and it's regulated by an agency. And then an interesting fact here is, so the bottom graphic actually shows black cherry distribution, Prunus serratina, and the top just shows those lines of latitude. So just think about it as similar growing conditions, same water, same amount of daylight, like similar conditions, and that's why they thrive, but they just don't have those natural predators when they show up. So 10%, it's called like the 10-10, 1 rule or power of 10 rule or something, but it's 10% will reproduce and survive outside their natural range. 10% of those will be invasive. And 1% of those will become a problem, so yeah, 1% overall of the escapees, I guess, from that, they call that center of origin. So like the center of origin for these that are a problem for us are all kind of on the same line of latitude. All right, the big two things, like everybody knows all these impacts, we go over them a lot, but the two big take homes are that non-native invasive plants and invasive species in general alter invasive plants alter plant community structure, and they break functional ecological relationships. So the two really important things to keep populations of native plants self-replicating and alive are their structure, what they're made up of, and then how those things interact, the way that the relationships are. And there's things that they need, like mycorrhizal relationships, that once they're broken, they're permanently altered. And I think a lot of the land we have here in Columbia is such that it's been there. We have a lot of really great land, but we also have a lot of land that's heavily denuded and has been hit by deer over the years and invasives. And I think that functional ecological relationships, we were talking about invasive worms earlier, have been broken. And sometimes perhaps they're broken beyond repair. I don't think so. I think there's a lot that can be done. What these two things lead to, these two big take homes about invasive plants, are biodiversity loss. And like that's crucial for us to stay alive. We need insects, we need bees and birds and all that stuff. Invasive species usually outcompete native plants for sunlight, nutrients, water, and space. It's a pretty simple fact, but it's very like observable out in open space. You can see it everywhere. Ultimately, native plants are displaced along with, like I said, with native insects, birds, and other wildlife. So trophic cascading effect, and it goes right down to the bottom all the way into the soil. There's a lot of different effects, which we'll touch on. But in general, invasive plants are introduced. I want to just highlight this slide real quick. This picture in the upper right is actually lesser celandine, one of our invasive spring ephemeral ground covers, really bad. It's wrecking our riparian systems. But on the left is a picture of spring beauty, and it's just making its way in. And so people expect probably local extirpation of things like spring beauties and trial lilies and things like that. And I know anecdotally in Columbia, I've talked to people that have said the wildflowers are decreasing in these wetland areas. So anyway, the picture of bamboo is a similar thing. It's just there's not much going on there. So on the right, monocultural stand of lesser celandine, and on the bottom, a monocultural stand of bamboo. So to understand these things, think about why they're doing so well here. A lot of these are escaped ornamentals, and these traits that we'll go over are why people like to plant them. So in general, invasive plants are introduced, they reproduce and spread rapidly, they persist in the environment, and they have few natural predators to balance population. They're extremely difficult to remove once established, and that it's very costly and time consuming. They can cause damage to natural resources, human infrastructure, the list goes on and on. They can be a human health hazard in the case of like poison hemlock or giant hogweed, for instance. These traits that we talked about, make them highly invasive. And so they have the same traits that we want in ornamentals, and that's why they're so bad. They make tons of seeds, or they spread really quickly, or they have really good germination rates in the soil where 98% of their seeds will come up, and they persist for a long time. So there are things that can be done, and I'm going to go over what we're doing here in Columbia. And I just want to say that this is in addition to what we're doing within the sustainability department with energy and water and the myriad of stormwater issues and other environmental issues that we address every day through our work. This is just about what we're doing with invasive plants. And I should mention, this is my background. I started with the team a few years back, but my background is in invasive plants. And so we're putting our resources sort of here in these items in terms of invasive plants. So we have the biggest thing is knowledge, is people being able to access these fact sheets that have .orgs, .edus, .govs. They're laid out in ways that people can access them. So we have a website. We have a bamboo website, as well as Tree of Heaven and Spotted Lanternfly. We do these Weed Warrior certifications twice a year. And that's been going on for dozens of years. Sort of regional leader in that, and we were one of the early community-driven invasive plant management programs where we are getting members of Columbia to come out and be stewards of their land by removing invasive plants, planting native plants back in that area. In the case of our adoptive spots, of which that's just growing every day. I think we have somewhere close to 50 now. And we do dozens of tabling, outreach events, things like talks, things like this, and dozens of pull and plant events with community groups, corporate groups, school groups. And then, of course, in the background there's the actual hard work, the boots on the ground stuff, right? And what my team is working on, a very small team, is early detection, rapid response. So from this bottom right corner, you can see that if we put our resources in this EDRR strategy, that we have a chance to save money in the end. Our rate of return on our investments is highlighted on that bar on the bottom of the graph. You'll see that for every dollar we spend on prevention, we save $100 in the future that we would have to spend further down the curve, right? And so kudzu, still don't know of any good established populations right here in Columbia. It's all around us. I've got kudzu flyers that I put up at an event last weekend. Every dollar I spent on that should, in theory, if we find it, I'll be able to respond to it, save us money in the end. There's other ones that we think that we can eradicate from the systems here: purple loosestrife, chameleon plant, and knotweed. And then bamboo is probably in the containment stage. This graph is interesting because it's the stages of invasion as well as the stages of management overlaid on each other. And so here you can barely see it, but in the middle there, it talks about the species being absent, and then prevention is kicking in. And then that green arrow is where the invasive species shows up. That's introduction, right? And then everything after that happens. And for multiflora rose and Japanese honeysuckle and dozens of these. We're way up in the asset-based protection management phase, where we're basically every dollar we spend, we're not saving money in the future, or we're just spinning our wheels on that. Although you have to spend money to protect your assets, and that's why it's called that. We also do Tree of Heaven work, where the spotted lanternfly is causing damage all over town. We have dozens and dozens of infestations. We have mature trees that were here probably before town was built that are 75 years old. We have that were just let to grow up in these hay fields that were transitioned over to our housing areas. And now that the spotted lanternfly has shown up in the last few years, people are starting to notice. And so are the spotted lanternflies. So perfect conditions for them. They rely on the Tree of Heaven as their host plant. They show up here and they have a field day with all our Tree of Heaven. But if you can remove it, you can reduce the spotted lanternfly. We work on that a lot right now this time of year. We also work on bamboo, which we're going to talk about tonight. We have habitat restoration and reforestation sites where we're trying to do canopy closure and taking out invasives and putting in natives on dedicated sites. And then we deal with resident requests. We help out with resident requests. We assist giving responding to people's houses and giving them advice on invasives, or a lot of times working on problematic invasives right behind their property. So that's a lot what we do. That's a pretty good coverage of what we do with invasive plants. But let's talk about bamboo. I'm going to try to fly through some of these slides. So 3 types of bamboo that I'm seeing out there, and there's way more, are this yellow groove bamboo, Phyllostochus aurea sulcata, arrow bamboo, and golden fishpole bamboo. So the golden and fishpole bamboo are the same, but that's often confused with yellow groove. We'll talk about the differences here in a second, but I wanted to talk about these 2 native ones, switch cane and native river cane, both in the Arundinaria genus. So those are native. And the big difference, and we do have them around here. Like I've seen them on iNaturalist, and I'm pretty sure there's remnant patches of that. It used to be widespread, but now it's really hard to find. 9 times out of 10, what we're seeing in open space, or more than that, are the invasive bamboo. But the big thing is this native stuff generally won't be over 1 inch in caliper. So if you're looking at a stand of bamboo and it's over 1 inch in caliper right away, and it won't be 20 feet in the air. So if you're looking at this really tall, thick stuff right off the bat, it's not the native stuff. And then, so you'll see a little line right here on this groove. That's called a sulcus or sulcus. It's just a vertical groove in between nodes in the inner node area on a bamboo culm on its cane. And that indicates that it's a non-native bamboo species as the sort of the dead giveaway. But those 3 things together, large, tall, sulcus, gonna be probably one of these 3. 90% of what I see is yellow groove bamboo. And there are some other interesting cultivars of bamboo that we do see out in open space because it was planted as privacy barriers by residents. We see a variety of them, but mostly it's these 3. And we rarely see the native one. Like I said, I haven't really actually even seen it in open space, although I'm sure it's there. But we always check beforehand. So that's a principal rule of integrated pest management or invasive plant control or anything like that is know what you're working on, because the worst thing you'd want to do is go in and kill like the last stand of like native river cane found in Howard County or something like that. So always double check. But that sulcus is a dead giveaway. Bamboo that's problematic here in Colombia is from Asia. There's 1,500 different species worldwide of bamboo. There's bamboo that's native to Africa and all the way through the tropics. But the ones that we have here are all generally from Asia, and they were introduced in the 1800s, like a lot of our other weeds, as erosion control, privacy hedges. There was a big pulp industry with bamboo for a while, but it's also an ornamental. And in the 70s, with the brown paint and the yellow shag carpets and the green colors and all the funky stuff, I think people loved it, and with tiki torches and stuff, and they planted it in their backyards. And so we're dealing with it now a little later. But there's 2 distinct types of bamboo that you'll hear talked about: pumping and running type. It's based on the way that their rhizome behaves. The rhizome is just a root it's actually a stem that's underground. It's an underground stem, but it's a reproductive part of this plant. So underground, it has a rhizome, or it has fibrous roots coming off of it. And you can sort of see that here on this example I brought. It's kind of messy, so maybe come up and check it out afterwards. But this is the rhizome right here. So a lot of the energy and things that go on with staying alive take place in this rhizome, and it's an underground section of stem. It's not actually a root. These little runners coming down are the root. But the running bamboo is the problematic one, because these rhizomes run indefinitely and a new bud forms on each node of the rhizome underground as it's spreading in the summer, and that will become the following year's culm and shoot up. And so running bamboo are problematic. Clumping bamboo, we have them. They're still problematic in my mind because I can't, like, I've seen huge patches of clumping bamboo that, like, I don't know how they got that big. They become established, and then it's they're the same. They're very difficult to remove. But I'm skeptical of that claim of clumping bamboo. I don't know if that's maybe a landscape thing where they say that, but I mean, there truly probably are, and there's ways to keep them contained. But yeah, they say there's two types, but we mostly see the running type in open space. So perennial woody grass, and this, think of it as essentially just a grass. It's a monocot. So when it comes up out of the ground, it has a single leaf. And if you look at it up close, it looks like grass. It's always, think of bamboo groves as always self-replicating. So it's always going on in the background. It's really kind of hard to see. It just always looks the same. It's evergreen, but it's always dropping its leaves and growing new ones at the same time. And it's always creeping underground and taking energy and moving it around. And so I put in general here next to this because it's so dependent on the amount of light at the site. And it's so dependent on the amount of water that it's accessed already and how dry it is. But in general, the life cycle are during the spring and summer warm growing months, it's doing its thing underground. It's not really growing above ground except for this portion of March and May, like kind of at the overlap of that springtime where it's sending up new shoots. And then once it's the sending of new shoots and it's reached the top to where how tall it's going to be, it leaves out and starts to photosynthesize. So that generally happens in like June or September. These ones that are already up and still have leaves on them, they'll start doing their photosynthesis in June and September, which is where all of the carbohydrates and sugar, all the things it needs to stay alive and reproduce. Remember, it reproduces with rhizomes. So October to November, things start. So basically, it's using energy from the ground to power its growth above ground in the springtime, and in the summer, it's mostly growing underground, but the springtime it's sending up shoots, and in the fall it's taking the energy from those shoots and sucking it back down and getting ready to go dormant. And this is really important because if we're going to remove as much of this energy from the system as we can, we have to do it when the energy is all up here, so we minimize the amount of resprouting we have down here. So we'll talk about that, but December and February, it effectively goes dormant. So after leaf drop and after it's done sucking all the nutrients downward into the soil, it starts to completely cease activity. And maybe like on a warm day, it will do a little bit of evapotranspiration or respiration or move some of this stuff through its system, but generally it goes dormant in the winter. Okay, so negative impacts of bamboo. Once it's established, they will grow indefinitely. Like that's the thing is like, there's patches of bamboo over by Blandaire Park, like close to here, actually. They're like 4.5 acres. They're huge. They're on like private land or county land or something. And there's like places around Howard County where there's these patches along the roadways that are just growing. They're continuing to grow. And so the harsh reality is that they don't stop growing and they don't stop expanding. And if a tree falls near a bamboo patch and it has a chance for new sunlight, it's going to take it and it's going to keep going. And especially if there's water, it will find water fast too. This underground network, once it's there, is really, really difficult to remove because it becomes intertwined and interwoven. This is just, imagine this. This is like actually a pretty shallow section. But just imagine this all the way across the floor and generally 18 inches deep. A lot of this is broken off. And any of these little pieces, so when we talk about control, any of these little pieces from vegetative reproduction can break off and become a new plant. That's how it survives.
Can it cross under footpaths?
Yeah, oh yeah, definitely. Yep. And that's important to know, like when we're talking about removal here in a second. So unfortunately, the negative impact is that it takes a lot of time to control these and persistent action. We talked about its spread being limited. So in a dark place, it doesn't spread as fast, and in the shade, a lot of places here in the woods, it's kind of contained. It doesn't look like it's that big and it's spreading, but as soon as a tree falls, it takes a little more space. And it does. It can go underneath, pass through concrete. We have it up against people's foundations here in Columbia. It's bad stuff, especially for your property value if it's on your own property. So a couple little factoids are so the culm, which if you remember back to that anatomy slide, is just the cane. It's just another word for the cane, but people call this little cone that emerges first in the springtime the culm as well, and that comes from a chunk of rhizome that is also, the culm is always the same size. So like this bamboo, once it sprouted up, it was always going to be that caliper because it came from a larger established rhizome. So the age of the infestation, the age of the rhizomes are what dictate the width of these culms. So they don't change after the first year. It's just kind of interesting. So where you see it, where you've been mowing it around the edge, it'll start to shoot up with a smaller reactive culm. But in the middle of the patches, those big ones will still be these things you can see emerging in the spring. It's really old. It's one of the older grasses we have. Apparently, it's stronger than steel, which I think they use it all over the world for things like scaffolding. It's one of the fastest growing plants on earth, and it has this unique thing. Some of the species have gregarious flowering, which is a phenomenon that occurs across the globe where individual species of bamboo will flower, set seed, and die all across the globe at the same time, and people don't really know why, apparently. So it's just kind of interesting. Not holding my breath for that to happen here in Columbia anytime soon. They're also really, really effective carbon sequestration plants, oddly enough. So there's also this respiratory illness called histoplasmosis that anybody working in bamboo should know about. It's apparently pretty nasty infection you can get in your lungs when it's friable dust in the summertime gets blown around. If it's been a heavily used roost for blackbirds or bats, there was a bat guano exposure in Baltimore, I guess, but that was like piles of bat guano on a bridge. And then in Louisiana, there was this situation called like the bamboo burning disease, where they didn't know why all these people got sick, but it was a blackbird roost of bamboo that they piled up. And then the same thing happened again in 2011 in Arkansas, where a bunch of people got sick. So yeah, that tells us that if we are in a bamboo grove where there's blackbirds, we need to check for poop, basically blackbird poop, and take measures. I haven't encountered anything like that where a particular species using it as a roost and leaving enough evidence that would become a problem. But in Maryland, there's some laws that are really interesting to note before we go into control. So in 2023, House Bill 090 allowed governing bodies of counties and municipalities to adopt ordinances to regulate invasive bamboo, which just means anybody, any city or town or county can make up their own rules on bamboo and potentially enforce them, and people have. So there's rules going back to 2011 in College Park. Frederick City and Bowie just got on board with some rules, and Montgomery County has this native plant protection bill that's, I think, been passed, but now they're working out some of the specifics. Don't quote me on that, but that potentially bans the sale of bamboo. Now, in 2024, we also got this bill 915, which essentially reorganizes our state lists of invasive plants and what can be bought and sold at nurseries and other places. And so that's in the process right now, where they're reorganizing it all based on like threat assessments and how costly these things are. And I hope that what comes out of that will be a ban on selling bamboo, because that'd be a good first step. Pennsylvania's got a lot of townships that are doing this, and then Virginia, Fairfax County has an enforcement arm, and it's their basic thing is like, if it's encroaching on other people's property, you're responsible for the mitigation, and you can't plant it or give it away or move it around and put it in town, and you can't sell it in Fairfax County. So the options in 090 are listed on the right there, and like some really good ones would be to stop selling it. But I just wanted to mention these. So here in Columbia, I've over the years, through other people's data and mine, we've identified 90 infestations, totaling over 8.5 acres of bamboo, invasive bamboo. 32 of those sites are under active management and control. And so what that means is the initial biomass removal is complete, the top growth is taken out, and the area or cover percent is decreasing. And of these 32, these are most are supposed to be, and they are generally at a maintenance level where we can get out, do like an hour of work, get back in, come back again 3 to 10 times in a year to make sure we didn't miss any, because there's so much going on throughout the growing season with bamboo that you do have to go check on it a lot and perform maintenance. So the key there is to revisit these sites. And again, I should say that bamboo control will take 5 to 10 years, regardless of the methods you use. It depends how successful you are. It's generally going to take up to 5 years, but potentially past 10 years. So how do we prioritize bamboo in the middle of all of these, and in addition to all these other invasives? So we only prioritize the bamboo patches for control if complete removal is possible. So like if we have multiple landowners and one landowner likes it, which is a case quite a bit, is like we'll have one landowner that put it there as a privacy barrier and the neighbor doesn't like it and it's spread onto open space, or it doesn't really matter where it came from, but like multiple landowners, having to agree. And if not everybody is controlling it, it doesn't really make sense for us to just do part of it, because we're going for a permanent eradication on the ones we're controlling. So if it's owned solely by CA and there's no landowner coordination, we do that. Or if everybody is controlling theirs on their respective property, and we do that quite a bit. We work with a lot of residents, because again, it has to be, so like I would say probably half of the 32 we're working on right now are where multiple people own the patch of bamboo. But so of these 90, these are all just bamboo patches that somehow lie on open space property in some way. There's probably another 100 on private property that we don't even map, that we don't know, but so there's probably 200 patches, maybe 20 acres of bamboo total. But we have tracked and kept a database of 90 of these. So we can't perform control work on residential property at this time, nor can we do cost shares, but cost shares are something that we're looking at in the future as a potential solution for some of these difficult situations where we find conflicting balances or a barrier to successful control over time. So, and there's areas that are small enough where people can DIY it themselves. Like that, a lot of this stuff's totally doable for a homeowner to work with us in tandem and work together at the same time using the same methods, preferably. But the other thing, and so in addition to these, to direct control on these sites we've already cracked open, we will coordinate contractors, get people in touch with the right companies that are doing this. Even though there are very few in Howard County, it's difficult to find. We have a list of people we've had good luck with. We come out and we'll meet people on site, and we generally map the infestation, send them a overview of where the footprint of the infestation is using GPS and GIS, and then tell them what we're going to do or what the game plan is, or how we can proceed, or if we can help them or not. Or we have a couple different statuses for our infestations on our dashboard in the upper right, but like I said, 32 of those 90 are considered open and active, and then we have a wait list of projects that are coming up And then we have another 40 of, that are still, we haven't started those yet. But yeah, we'll provide technical support and long-term inspection and monitoring of these sites. All right, how do we kill it? First thing, control methods so the first step is excavation, if you can excavate it. So if you can dig it out, if it's small enough, absolutely go in and dig out as much of the rhizome as possible, because that's where it reproduces. Basic theory of invasive plant management: stop it from reproducing, it will go away. It will die, it'll stop being, its population will decrease. So remove as many propagules from the system as you can. It's really detailed oriented. You have to be really make sure you're not leaving a lot in the soil. It's costly and it takes a while. Typically on these larger patches, disposal is an issue. So where do you even put it when you dig it up? And then do you need to bring in new soil? And also the rhizomes can go up to 36 inches deep. So you sometimes have to dig out pretty deep. Many times it's only 18 or 24, but they can go really deep. Mechanical grinding is the next step on these larger ones. If you have enough bamboo that you need a grinder. And I have a little video here of this grinder, but we might be able to come back to that. You'll see the machine is called a Forster grinder, and it's attached to a skid steer, track mounted skid steer. They're really heavy. It has a, it's not working when I clicked on it. Oh well. It has a little flail, like a drum on the front with teeth, and it's a rotary thing. It grinds through it, and grinds it down, and the operators grind that down into the soil about 6 inches, and that breaks up all the culms and rhizomes. It shreds everything into
Yeah, it was responding that time.
Something's happening. Maybe we're just seeing the page.
It worked fine before, of course.
Yeah, right. So the grinding late summer to fall is optimal, right? Because again, all that energy is in that upper top growth. If you have the need to till it and you have the means, that's a really good thing as well. A couple weeks after you grind it or get the top growth off, that breaks up anything that's left in there, brings it to the surface, and I think it dries it out a little bit, and makes conditions a little less favorable for it to resprout. It's good for large sites, and that's what we usually do a week to 2 weeks later. You can mow it and repeatedly cut it to control it from spreading out in a bigger footprint. Yes, it will definitely limit the speed at which it spreads in size. But it will never permanently, you could potentially permanently eradicate it over time if you were very, very good about never letting it get large enough to notice or have good enough photosynthesis. But I've only seen this work on the edge of patches that are not completely mowed. So I'm not sure about repetitive mowing. I think that it could limit its spread, but we also use mechanical methods like brush cutting on a lot of our patches that are too steep, or for really small patches. So check my time here. We have about 20 minutes left. Just flying through these. All right, so one of the other methods in invasive plant management is manual. So that's just using anything. It's also called physical control. It's just using your hands, anything that's not in a machine. So hand pulling, I don't know if you're going to hand pull the bamboo in the bottom right, but the picture of it in the upper right are bamboo rhizomes poking up above ground. And things like that, where you could get your shovel into it, you might be able to dig that out with a shovel. But again, you have to be really, really detail oriented and grab everything. It's really hard to dig them up. Some people will take a screen and send the bamboo back through the screen to reclaim some of the soil and make sure there's no fragments. Very difficult to physically control bamboo. Another method, and one we rely on for bamboo control over the long term is chemical. So herbicide, the product generally used in this area and that we use in open space is glyphosate. The trade names are Aquamaster or glyphosate 5.4. These are aquatic formulations of the systemic herbicide glyphosate. They have low to no soil activity, meaning that the herbicide binds to the soil, and so it's safer to use around desirable vegetation, basically at the base of trees. It's way less risky than using something like a product like a Mazapir, which I've listed here, which works really well, provides like 100% control, but persists in the soil a lot longer, and it has high mobility in the soil, so it has a chance of harming native vegetation that you're spraying it underneath it. So that's why we use glyphosate, and those are the tools that are recommended by published literature. And so the key with that is that you must follow the label, right? Especially with herbicide. It is a federal law, so FIFRA governs what's on the label, and as an applicator, if you don't follow the label, you're in violation of a federal law. Another thing is you have to keep track of how much you're using, because there is a maximum amount of rate. I can't just go out there and just like dump herbicide all over this stuff. We have to make sure we're not violating that label. It's a federal law. The way we apply this herbicide is generally through either backpack sprayers or through direct cut stump application equipment. So herbicide daubers. Let's talk about foliar application. So 2 to 4% glyphosate and 0 plus 0.5% non-ionic surfactant in water. So 2% glyphosate, 0.5% surfactant, 90 whatever 6.5%, whatever, or 97.5%. The key is that it has to be applied to fleshy new growth. You'll see in this picture here how that waxy appearance, if you were to rub the leaves on the right, they would feel really hard and waxy. So the herbicide, when you spray it on there with a backpack sprayer as a foliar application, it doesn't stick really well, and it doesn't penetrate the cuticle to get into the cells to start to do whatever it does, which glyphosate is an amino acid inhibitor. So basically it inhibits certain amino acids that these plants need to grow. So the thing about the surfactant is important because you can stimulate bamboo to grow fleshy growth by cutting it, right? So when it's up really tall and it's waxy, thick growth, you can't spray it. You have to cut it, and you have to get it to reemerge as fleshy growth. The problem with this application is that it's non-selective and it kills everything, so it kills even grass. But as it emerges to a height of about 3 feet, it's very effective, and it gives you like 80% kill. So cut the bamboo down, let it regrow, let it expand with leaves, spray it with herbicide, and you'll get generally what I've been seeing, what I see in published research is 80% control or greater. Depending on the time of the year. But if you can time it just right, where it's sucking down, we're hitchhiking on the vascular system of these plants with herbicide. And if we can hitchhike at the right time of year, it will go the furthest underground to these plants. And we can only do that. You can only hitchhike the best time of the year by following the label and following the instructions, right? So if you use too much, it doesn't work. And if you use too little, it doesn't work. And September through October is optimal to do this foliar application. Cut stump is the other herbicide application we use, which is cutting the bamboo at the base. I don't have a picture of me cutting a culm, but that's a piece of English ivy where we're just cutting it at the base and quickly applying the same herbicide, but in a higher concentration. It's a 50% glyphosate, 50% water directly to that area, which you're putting very like less than a quarter ounce, on each stem, a very small amount. But again, you still need to keep track of the amount, because using the method in the bottom right actually ends up using a lot of herbicide if you're using a whole bunch right next to each other on multiple canes. Here's some next to that picture in the bottom left that were cut, herbicide was applied. It basically prevents them from resprouting. And if you do it at the right time, it will translocate through the rhizomes a certain distance. It won't go all the way through again, a certain kill percentage. You're not going to get them all with one thing, especially with bamboo. So yeah, year round, the cut stump thing, you can cut it and apply this stuff year round is a little unknown thing, but it's good to know if you want to work on it in the middle of winter. There is some herbicide activity if you did it on a warm enough day. But again, best in fall. The best way that we've seen is this integrated method. So cutting bamboo to stimulate the growth. There's also a right time to cut the bamboo, right? So if you cut it in May through October, in the main part of the year, growing season, it will try to leaf out down low. But if you cut it really early in the spring, in like January, February, March, April, it will shoot way up and then resprout way up high where you can't spray it. So then you have to cut it again in May, and people don't understand, oh, I'm cutting it again in May. But that's just to force it to leaf out. So you'll see this photo right here. That's where it's been cut at about 3 feet, forced to leaf out, spray herbicide. Same process there. So that integrated approach is basically almost like whack-a-mole on a site. Once you get the top growth removed, you're seeing a little bit resprout, you're using less and less herbicide, you're causing less and less disturbance, and you're letting the ground start to heal, right? So using multiple methods and combinations is almost always more effective than using one. And the best method actually is cultural. So prevention is best. This is a photo of a rhizome barrier. So there are these cultural methods like trying to like fence it in. I don't know. I haven't worked with rhizome barriers that much. I think there's places where it works well. This one right here is almost like a smothering thing. It's not the rhizome barriers actually act as a wall and they go underground. So this isn't a rhizome barrier. This is an example of a neighbor trying to exclude the bamboo from invading into their yard. Takes years, might go outside out through the edges, through where you overlap it, underneath it. But there's other cultural methods you can do, like doing talks, putting literature out, and then making sure you're not moving around contaminated soil. So in summary, I know that was a lot on control. We want to remove the large biomass above ground, basically using any means possible. If you can remove the underground growth with an excavator, great, do it. And then grind down or cut if not. So gotta get that top growth off and then control resprouts over the years using herbicide. Have to follow the label. It's the federal law. We talked about that. If you're a homeowner doing this, use the information on the fact sheets on the end of this and use multiple fact sheets and review them and read the whole herbicide label. If you're going to do the application yourself, it's really important to use it, to read everything on the label, or hire somebody that's actually a licensed applicator with the Maryland Department of Agriculture, because they'll probably be more effective. And then use multiple methods like cut stump, painting, dotting it on, and be persistent but patient. And we've seen really good luck on some of our sites. So we'll get into that real quick. King's Contrivance on Cotton Mill Court in King's Contrivance on Cotton Mill Court. This is down on the side of Beaver Creek. This was ground in July of 2021 and 2022. Actually, let me get to it, but I'll give you the exact date in a second. Either 2021 or 22. It was ground down using a grinder just like that. It resprouted. So this is what we resprouted after we ground. So maybe like 50% control. And then we cut that and sprayed that in July. So this is what I came back to in July of 2022. And this was the first time we did an herbicide application here. And this is what it looked like shortly afterwards. And then now this is what it looks like. And so it's had a few years to heal. I'll report there's no bamboo on this stretch or on this site at all. And that was, yeah, so here's the timeline. 7/22 grind, 8/22 till 7/23 spray resprout. Sorry, so it was off by a year. Okay, so 22, 23. And then what you don't see pictures of is me going out in 2024 like a dozen times and getting all the little spots that I had to keep going back to. I didn't just go these visits. There was like 30 more visits, or 20, bunch of visits in between. Oak and Shield up in Harper's Choice, same exact process. It was ground down a little bit later, but this is the ground in October. That's the regrowth in June the following year. And then we sprayed that with a foliar application, and it's almost gone now. I mean, there's probably less than 5% left. So that's using that integrated method where we're cutting it back, forcing it to resprout. This one was done all using cut stump. So all using reciprocating saws, cut at the base, herbicide applied directly. So, and that was done optimal time of year, June last year. This year, we had some regrowth. There was some stuff coming up and we cut it and we sprayed it when it leafed out. So, it's almost gone. This one, it's first year, it's gonna take a while, but we've seen a massive reduction. Another good one, there's a lot of these. We'll try to rip through these because I know we're probably entering 7:30 time. Yeah, we're getting close, but we could talk about the process. This one was both. So this one was cutting it with a brush cutter, believe it or not, putting it onto the back of a dump truck and taking it off site, and then working around the trees to treat at the base of the trees. And it was just a ton of physical work removing that top growth, but it's starting to recover slowly. There's oddly some native plants coming up in there, but a lot of other invasives are coming up in there, but it's kind of regreening and it looks pretty good this year. I'm pleasantly surprised with the level of control we got. But there's native plants in here. There was a mayapple and there's this burnweed stuff, which comes in after a fire, which is pretty cool. So there's native seeds in the seed bank underneath this bamboo waiting to just be released, right? Town center at Lake Kit, that was one of my first jobs. They were like, this one has been a real persistent one for years. And I saw like 2 resprouts on the site this year. So this one was you used that no grinding and no tilling, just all top growth removal, followed by dabbing with the herbicide applicator and then foliar spraying where it popped up. There's a couple resprouts left. There it is now. There, so yeah, you can see the lake now. Wild Lake, we had this cool project on Wild Turkey Lane. Maybe this thing will work now. This is an example of a large site. Oh, did you just hit enter? Is that? No. Okay, well, this is over half an acre over up in Bryant Woods. We had the same company come in and they ground it all down, and it's just quite the transformation. The homeowner followed up with excavation on their side, and the property was, yeah, there we go. So that's the grinder. This infestation was owned by Howard County Public Schools and 2 private residents. These folks and the folks back here. So we had to coordinate control, all of them, all at the same time to do it. But it's looking great. Again, very few resprouts. We still have to manage those resprouts. There was bamboo there. It's resprouting, but it looks like that. I mean, it's minimal. Right? So that's just going back and forth to that same shot just to show before and after. Yeah, this does the same thing. Yeah, so that's just the same spot. So it's possible. And this is what we're seeing at our sites, is just a slow decline in the population. Wild Lake near the dam, another persistent, this one's been here for years because I found photos from 2015, what it looked like in 2015, but we've got it down now to 4 or 5 resprouts this year. But we started that one actually in like 2022, so I don't know. I don't have a image of it in transition, but let's go one more here. Couple more. Oh yeah, I just wanted to say the small sites are really important. Like the calls we get about a small patch of bamboo are really good because the photo at the upper right eventually becomes the photo at the bottom. And then eventually the photo at the bottom becomes this Cape Ann Drive infestation we just started working on. We ground it down and tilled it about a month ago. It's starting to resprout already underground. This is a piece of the rhizome from it, and you can see underneath from the rhizome buds, it's already sending up regrowth here, so starting to respond, and cutting it without doing something afterwards is just gonna make it mad. So in a couple weeks, we'll come through and we'll do a spot treatment. I think we're gonna have really good luck with the timing on this because it was so droughty. We did this in August. It was so hot. Like I suspect there wasn't much energy being saved in the rhizomes and the root storage for bamboo. I think it was all above ground. So we came in, did the removal. It was very like difficult cleanup. Like we were dragging stuff out of the creek bed and the grinders, and just went on for several days. But it's now like a layer of duff. And as it regrows, we'll manage it with herbicide and we'll plant into it slowly as the control is at an acceptable level. Like we don't want to replant into these too quickly, but in some cases we are replanting in spots to get trees started. So that's the goal eventually. This is another one in Rainleaf Court. We have a ton of cleanup work to do out there. It's about 25% of the way done on the initial tack. So I won't quite even say that the initial tack is done, but we have we're working with the Hamilton apartment complex and another HOA over there to hopefully all come together, multiple landowners to control this one over time as well. But all that to say that it's possible and that it's worth it because that's a lot of usable space that we're missing out on. And a neat little anecdotal story from this patch was the morning after this all came down. It came down in like a couple quick days. A little kid was playing outside here by their backyard and they were looking through their fence for the first time at the neighbors, the apartment complex across the way. And there was another little kid that waved across the way. It was the next morning. And it was like, oh, it's the first time, they've seen each other in, X number of years. I mean, that patch has had to have been there since the 70s. So new neighbors are meeting each other, but the problem is that we have to keep going back. There's a whole bunch of resources and fact sheets definitely should look at, and then quickly address those questions that were pre-submitted. Bamboo, yes, mowing stops it from spreading. If you mow all of it, if you miss a little bit on the edge, it's still going to grab a bunch of sunlight and make sugar and starch and do other stuff that it needs to resprout and regrow. So if you're going to mow it, you have to mow all of it and you have to do it repetitively, and you can't ever really let it leaf out. The idea being that it won't photosynthesize and it will just slowly like dissipate out. But generally it will turn into a grass. It'll turn into like a turf that it hurts to walk on, but it's not shooting out in every direction and big. So yeah, you can mow it. And are native bamboo species as bad as non-natives? Not at all, definitely not. Like we want to identify them. We went over that. We don't want to kill shatter cane, river cane. So who do we report property owners who have bamboo to? If near open space, email me below. And if it's not, you could drop them off a fact sheet or go talk to them, or even let me know. I can put it in our database, but really we're just tracking the ones on open space. So until Howard County has maybe some guidance for legislation or enforcement, just tell me about the ones that are affecting open space or that you need help with or whatever. And yeah, the chemicals are safe that we reviewed only if used according to the label and carefully, and that the labels are read ahead of time, and either the applicators are trained if it's being used in public or then they're licensed, or the homeowner has accepted responsibility of using herbicide near trees, right? Because the biggest off-target damage problem you could see with using herbicide near trees or under trees are damage to the things we're trying to protect. So if you're careful and you literally do it the way the label says, you won't have a problem. You can always email me directly or other environmental issues. This is the best email to reach our work group, the sustainability work group. And thanks for having me.